Hello everybody, welcome to the Working Class Revolt, a channel that I've set up to talk about the real problems that affect each and every one of us. The problems that the mainstream media, the political parties in this election, nobody's talking about. It's the problems that every week make you worry about the bills that you're going to pay. It's the reason that this country is on the verge of bankruptcy. And on today's video, our first video, we're going to talk about the big elephant in the room. And through this general election, we've heard all the parties talk about different ways that they're going to improve the NHS, they're going to get more police officers. But what they don't talk about is the £1.2 trillion worth of income that they get off each and every one of you out of taxation. And that is about £17,000 per person we pay through one way or another in taxes to keep this government afloat. Now, £17,000 of taxes for the average family, that means that this country should be richer than anybody's wildest dreams. But we can all see with our own eyes that is simply not the case. And would you be shocked to find out that even when they bring in the £1.2 trillion worth, just to break even, the UK government must borrow another £120 billion. And again, that is just to break even. The overall debt of the United Kingdom is £2.4 trillion. Yes, you heard me right, trillion pound, 2.4. That is one of the biggest debts a country in the world has. And relatively speaking, the United Kingdom is a very, very small country. So let's put that in comparison with the biggest country in the world, which is Russia. Russia has a debt of 10 times smaller than the United Kingdom, around £250 billion. And that is why a country like Russia, without getting into the politics of it, is still able to carry out the Ukraine war. It has 10 times less debt than the United Kingdom while being in a war for the last 2 years. So something is massively wrong with the UK's spending. Now, there's many things that we must spend on. The NHS, for instance. I don't believe for 1 minute we should cut spending to the NHS. We will do a separate video on how we can better spend that money. For one, we can get rid of a lot of the middle managers or the people who work in the NHS just talk about how it needs more equality and diversity. The NHS, first and foremost, should be there to be free at the point that somebody needs it and to save our lives and make us better. Nothing else. Today we're going to talk about some of the spending that this government has undertook over the last few years, just to give you a small glimpse at how much it spends. But before we go into that, can I please ask you to like, share and subscribe? With the algorithms now with YouTube, it's very hard for someone like me sitting here in my living room to get views. So please do everything you can to follow this channel. I promise we will always keep everything factually true and try to inform people of what's really going on. And we'll also look at ways on which we can open our minds and which we can tackle these issues that plague each and every one of us. So the first spending we're going to talk about is COVID. Now, yes, many people out there have different views. My view on COVID would probably get me kicked off YouTube, so I'll keep that to myself. But many people believe that there was a deadly virus going around and there was nothing we could do but do lockdowns and do payments out. And I respect each and everybody's opinion. But let's look at the spending that COVID cost. £410 billion. That is nearly half of overall spending per year that the UK government does. Now, the question you've got to ask yourself, regardless of your views on COVID, did spending £410 billion save lives? Did we need 3 lockdowns. By doing the lockdowns, the government then had to pay all of us to stay at home. If we'd done 1 lockdown and then been sensible, we would have probably saved around 2/3 of that money. If we'd done like some countries have done and not done any lockdowns by the people who was most vulnerable, and we all used a bit of common sense, we would have barely spent any of that £410 billion. So when the Conservative government blame, and by the way, I'm no bigger fan of the Labour Party, when the Conservative government blame COVID, they're half telling the truth. COVID is a big part of the financial problems that we face at the moment. But remember this, it was your government that decided to do it. Other countries had a choice. You had a choice. You could have given the people of the United Kingdom the true facts and give them an alternative to what would happen if we'd locked down the vulnerable and we'd been more sensible rather than just simply lock us all down, pay us all to stay at home. Well done, you now have £410 billion worth of debt. And that's not even to include the amount of corruption that went on. New companies setting up, who have friends in the cabinet who all of a sudden sold PPE, which had never sold anything like before, the millions and billions we paid to all them. A lot of people through COVID got rich, and my opinion is a lot of people's lives probably didn't get saved with the measures. So that's COVID. The next big spend we do is around £50 billion over the next decade per year on going net zero. Net zero is where we have the belief is emissions which we cause affecting global warming. I'm not an expert on the theories on global warming, but I can see that the money we spend. Now we believe that by spending this £50 billion a year, we will get to net zero and we will save the planet. Well, again, let's look at a few facts around climate change. Yes, nobody can deny the climate's changing. People will argue on whether that's man-made or it's natural, but let's say it's man-made. Let's say that we are the cause of it. We are bankrupt in our country. We can't afford £50 billion a year. We are bankrupt in our country when we produce less than 1% of CO2 emissions. Countries like China and Russia cannot open enough coal plants. They sell the coal and the oil around the world and make billions of pounds worth of income, provide cheap heating for the people of the country when they produce far more than 1% of net zero. But this country is sending us to bankruptcy with this ideology that they're going to save the world when we produce less than 1% and spending £50 billion a year. I think that should be scrapped. We should always look to be more environmental friendly. We should plant more trees. We should look at green energy. We should look at it sensibly without spending fortunes of money on it. And my biggest issue, more than the debt on this, is the fact that I'm actually a councillor for a local government, and the amount of my residents that can't afford the heating. Do you know over 20,000 people per year die because they simply can't heat their house up? That's too many people dying, and that's just recorded numbers. It's probably far, far more. Our net spending, we have spent already £12 billion in the Ukraine war. Now, many people say that that's good spending. I question that, because if you take away mainstream media, all of us condemn what Vladimir Putin has done. We're not going to talk today about was he provoked by NATO or the European Union. There's many records showing the warnings that Putin gave, but he's invaded another country. But let's look at our part. Should we be paying £12 billion in the financial crisis that we're in now? The mainstream media tells you that Russian tanks are breaking down and Ukraine are winning the war. Well, that simply is not the case. You look at any alternative media which have got satellites in the air taking pictures of Ukraine. There is no Ukraine left. Ukraine have lost the war. It's a matter of how long they can keep going with the money that we're pumping in. We need to go to the negotiation table and try and get the best deal for Ukraine. Yes, is it right? Is it wrong that Putin may keep that land? Yes, but the simple fact is if we don't negotiate now, unless you want to go in a hot war with Russia, which I'm sure nobody wants, we must negotiate with Ukraine. Otherwise, there will be no Ukraine, and we would have spent billions and billions and billions of pounds, which just go wasted, on the hope that we can weaken the Russian army, which, as we've already mentioned in this video, has relatively low debt and could carry on the war without borrowing for another 50 years. So let's get sensible about it. But let's make sure this time, when there's negotiations, we don't send Boris Johnson out to scupple them. As a lot's been reported, Russia and Ukraine did peace talks right at the beginning of the war, before hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people had died, at a point where Russia was going to give the land back it took. And Boris Johnson flew out and said the West isn't ready to give up the war. So there's questions there, who else is to blame for the blood on the hands of the Ukrainian and Russian people. Our next spend is £135 billion worth of money we spend a year on benefits. Now, we also spend about £135 billion on people's retirements, the pensions. Obviously, that's not something we can look at cutting. The £135 billion worth of benefits, we certainly don't look at cutting that off people who are disabled, or genuine sick, or people who fell on hard times and need a period of time out of work to get back in work. However, we all know that's not simply the case. There is a lot of people out there that it just doesn't pay for them. I understand it doesn't pay to go back to work, so they stay on benefits. In any society, you're going to get those people that just don't want to go to work, but I'd like to believe that is a small number of people. What we need to do is we need to make it more, the incentive bigger for people to go back to work. We need to work more with people on the job centre to actually get them jobs, and we need to bring that number far down. That's a number you can never get to zero, but I'm sure you'll all agree the £135 billion is far too much. Now then, on other figures that we can look at, a lot of people complain about the hotels for migrants, which costs around £5 billion a year. The problem I have with that one is I agree we should have controlled borders, and I agree we should not be spending £5 billion a year. However, £5 billion a year is on the shorter side. Even if we saved that, we would always help some amount of refugees, and it's not a drop in the ocean, it's a lot of money, but it certainly wouldn't change the crisis we're in. Some other figures that you can look at, if we go a little bit further back, are things like wars, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan. We spent billions upon billions upon billions of pounds. It's quite hard to relate it now because sometimes past with inflation, it's hard to, the number looks smaller then, but in relative terms it's a lot more. Every time we go to a war or do something like that, or something like COVID, we borrow. Every time we borrow, that national debt of 2.2 trillion builds up, our repayments build up. Very hard to find exact figures for the United Kingdom and what we actually pay back a year just on the debt. That's an answer that I'm going to have in the upcoming videos. It's not as easy just to find on Google. I've had to do a freedom of information request. But this video is also going to talk a lot about local government. See, a big spend that this country, the government do, is the budgets for the local government. That's something I have got experience in the council that I'm a councillor in, an independent councillor, by the way, not part of any national party. And the money that I see wasted on a local level is unbelievable. So please stay in touch for those videos. We're going to also do videos about our health and the lies that we're told, the stuff that's in our food, the stuff that's in our water. We will touch on political parties. We're going to do a video about opinion polls we've seen this general election, which parties are not mainstream, which parties are mainstream, and anything that you comment, I will do the revision on and we'll do a video on it. So please like, share and subscribe, and please help me grow this channel, and we'll always be honest with you here at the Working Class Revolt. Thank you all very much. Goodbye.